Why do some young women choose to marry men who are much older than they are? The story of Rosanna Galliano was not an isolated case. She was a young college student who fell in love with a man the same age as her father and eventually married him. However, the tragic conclusion of their relationship stunned Argentina and turned the case into one of the most widely discussed topics in the media. Who was Rosanna Galliano? Rosanna Edith Rodriguez Galliano was born on November 24, 1978, in a suburb of Buenos Aires. She was the youngest of 4 children born to Ronaldo Galliano and Graciela Rodriguez. Rosanna was raised alongside her older brothers, Oscar and Gustavo, and her sister Monica. The siblings shared a close bond from an early age. Her father owned a small auto repair shop and was a skilled mechanic. Her mother had previously worked as a teacher at a local high school, but after having children, she chose to leave her profession to focus on raising her family and running the household. Those who knew Rosanna well described her as cheerful, energetic, and highly sociable. She had many friends at school, was actively involved in dance, and showed a natural talent for drawing. She dreamed of becoming an artist or an interior designer. Determined to follow her ambitions, she enrolled at the National University of the Arts in Argentina after graduating. She likely would have accomplished everything she set out to do if not for the arrival of a man in her life. In 2001, a man named Jose Jacinto Ariza brought his vintage car to Ronaldo Galliano's workshop, where it had a particularly complicated mechanical problem. The seasoned mechanic agreed to take on the work and discussed the details and cost of the repair. Around that time, Rosanna stopped by her father's workshop to deliver lunch her mother had prepared. With her youthful beauty, expressive eyes, and bright smile, Rosanna immediately caught his attention. After that, the man began showing up at the workshop every day, supposedly to check on the progress of the car and supervise the repairs. He always arrived around lunchtime, hoping to see Rosanna again. At this point, it's important to provide some background on Jose Ariza and his troubled past. He was born on November 28, 1948, in a rural department in the northwestern Argentine province of Tucumán. He was the son of Pedro Ariza and Elsa Dorotea Aguilar, with Italian ancestry on his father's side and Greek ancestry on his mother's. Much of his childhood and early adulthood was spent in Naples and on the Greek island of Crete. Some sources claim that Jose Ariza's father had close connections to organized crime and accumulated significant wealth through illegal activities. In the mid-1980s, his father died under mysterious circumstances that suggested a targeted killing, possibly carried out by someone with a personal motive. At the time of his father's death, Jose was serving a prison sentence for smuggling illegal substances, a term that lasted until 1996. He and his mother later lived in the United States, but he violated immigration laws and faced deportation. His mother, Elsa, obtained U.S. citizenship, purchased a home in Boston, and stayed there with her sister. Jose had been married twice before, yet he maintained no contact with his former wives or the children from those relationships. He avoided discussing his past, keeping his previous marriages, criminal record, questionable family background, and the mystery surrounding his father's death hidden from others. By the time these events unfolded, Jose was already over 50 years old and owned several properties in Buenos Aires and its surrounding areas. He also had 3 luxury cars and dressed in an elegant, expensive style, knowing exactly how to present himself to impress those around him. Projecting sophistication and charm, his charisma quickly captivated young Rosanna. They exchanged phone numbers, and within a week, Jose invited her on a date. Their relationship progressed so quickly that Rosanna did not fully grasp how deeply she had fallen for a man who was old enough to be her father. The couple began seeing each other in secret, and at first, Rosanna's parents were completely unaware. She confided in her older sister, Monica, who immediately voiced her concerns but agreed to keep the relationship from their parents for the time being. 6 months later, Jose showed up at the Galliano home to formally ask for Rosanna's hand in marriage. At that point, he was 52 years old, while Rosanna was only 22. Her parents were stunned by the proposal and were unsure how to respond. Rosanna's mother, Graciela, pulled her aside and asked directly whether she truly intended to marry a man so much older than her. Rosanna hesitated briefly before telling her mother that she loved Jose and was ready to become his wife. Still, Graciela sensed that something was wrong. Her daughter seemed tense, distressed, and even frightened, raising the impression that Jose may have been pressuring her to accept the marriage. Jose, however, insisted that their 30-year age difference was not a barrier to their love and should not prevent them from starting a family together. At the end of 2001, just 7 months after they met, the couple married, and Rosanna moved into Jose's home. At first, everything seemed ideal, and Jose appeared to genuinely love and care for his young wife. He organized a lavish wedding celebration, showered Rosanna with expensive gifts, and planned a romantic seaside honeymoon. In 2002, Rosanna and Jose welcomed their first child, a son named Geronimo. But after their son's birth, serious problems began to surface. Jose effectively confined Rosanna to their home, controlling every aspect of her life. He monitored her phone calls and forbade her from contacting not only her friends but even her own family. At first, Rosanna tried to hide her struggles from her family. She believed she could manage the situation on her own and hoped that the problems in her marriage would eventually resolve themselves. Instead, as time went on, the situation only deteriorated. Jose revealed himself to be jealous, manipulative, and controlling, with a tendency toward aggression. He verbally abused Rosanna, insulted her family, and even told her he had taken her out of the trash, implying she should be grateful for everything he provided. Rosanna became increasingly afraid of her husband and did everything she could to avoid upsetting him. She was willing to cut off contact with her parents, brothers, and sister just to keep the peace. Yet Jose needed no real reason to explode in anger or violence. Eventually, the emotional abuse escalated into physical assaults. Jose began striking her almost daily, and it became evident that he took pleasure in the power he exerted over her. Rosanna lived in constant fear, unsure of what to do. She naively hoped that the situation would eventually improve and that her husband would stop tormenting her. Instead, things only grew worse. Jose owned several firearms, including 2 handguns that he kept loaded at all times and liked to show off to guests. He often threatened Rosanna with these weapons, warning that he would use them if she ever argued with him or tried to leave. One day, her brother Oscar became an unintended witness to such a scene. He had stopped by unexpectedly after being unable to reach Rosanna and growing concerned. Finding the front door unlocked, he entered, only to find himself in the middle of a heated argument. Jose was verbally insulting Rosanna and her family, slapped her several times, and then brandished a gun. He grabbed her by the hair, pressed the gun barrel to her face, and spoke casually about how much he would enjoy pulling the trigger. Oscar immediately stepped in, positioning himself between his sister and Jose to protect her. He threatened to call the police and urged Rosanna to take the child and come with him to their parents' house. Surprisingly, Rosanna refused. She told Oscar that she intended to stay with her husband and asked him to leave, insisting that he not interfere in their marital issues. Oscar was shocked but did not argue further. He quietly left the house, though he lingered nearby, wanting to ensure that Rosanna was safe and that Jose would not act on his violent threats. Oscar waited outside, hidden from view, and took several photos with his phone. Although early 2000s phone cameras had poor quality, the images clearly showed Jose holding a gun and pointing it at his terrified wife, who was sitting on the floor. Oscar only left after Jose had put the weapon away and locked himself in his study. In 2006, despite the ongoing fear and tension at home, Rosanna and Jose had their second child, a son named Nino. Rosanna did everything she could to repair her relationship with her husband, hoping to preserve their marriage so their sons could grow up in a stable, 2-parent household. Yet the situation remained unchanged, and Jose continued his cruelty and abuse. He had an unusually close bond with his mother, Elsa, who supported him in every way. Even though Elsa lived in the US, she often traveled to Argentina and stayed at her son's house for extended periods, sometimes lasting a month or 2. For Rosanna, these visits were a constant ordeal, a humiliating experience. She was forced to serve her husband's elderly mother while enduring daily insults and criticisms. Elsa considered Rosanna a terrible mother, an inadequate wife, and a poor homemaker. Elsa frequently told Rosanna that she didn't deserve her son, that she was dependent on him for everything, and that she amounted to nothing. She had witnessed Jose's violent outbursts toward Rosanna multiple times but never intervened. Instead, she blamed Rosanna for provoking him and warned that if Rosanna ever tried to divorce, she and Jose would take the children and ensure Rosanna never saw them again. Even when Elsa wasn't physically present, she exerted influence from afar. She stayed in constant contact with Jose, asking about everything happening in the household, offering advice, and encouraging him not to let Rosanna get away with anything. In mid-2006, when Nino was just 7 months old, Jose brutally attacked Rosanna again, breaking her nose and several ribs. This violent assault became the breaking point for Rosanna, and she finally decided to report the abuse to the authorities. She filed a formal domestic violence complaint and requested a forensic examination, which documented multiple bruises and injuries at different stages of healing, revealing a pattern of systematic physical abuse. Surprisingly, the case was ultimately dismissed, and Jose managed to persuade Rosanna to give him another chance. She continued living under the same roof as him, but began confiding in her sister Monica. Whenever incidents occurred, Rosanna would call Monica to describe what had happened, and she even sent messages documenting the threats she received from both Jose and Elsa. Monica kept a journal of these conversations, maintaining records for over a year. Rosanna repeatedly tried to escape her husband's abuse, taking her 2 sons and hiding at her sister's house for days at a time. According to close family members, Jose threatened to kill her or take the children, forcing her to return at least 5 times during these attempts. By the end of 2007, Rosanna had filed for divorce and obtained a court order prohibiting Jose from approaching her or their sons. However, Jose countersued, asserting his right to visit his sons. The court established a strict schedule for these visits, deciding that they would take place at a vacant country house owned by Jose. Rosanna often attended these visits with her brother Oscar, as she feared Jose and felt safer with someone who could step in if anything went wrong. During this time, Rosanna befriended the local gardener, Daniel Gonzalez, and confided in him about her traumatic experiences. Daniel was sympathetic and witnessed several occasions when Jose publicly humiliated Rosanna with cruel words. He would later testify about these incidents in court. In August 2007, Rosanna met a young man named Oscar Lugo, and their friendship soon developed into a romantic relationship. Oscar was only 3 years older than Rosanna, but he was kind, caring, and attentive. He quickly formed a bond with her sons. It seemed she had finally found the right partner, and the couple even began planning their wedding once her divorce from Jose was finalized. Yet Jose continued to obsessively monitor the life of his still legal wife. He tried to control her, and when threats and physical abuse failed, he turned to bribery. He offered Rosanna a car if she would return to him, but she firmly refused. Desperate, Jose, still in close contact with his mother, confided in her about his plan to have Rosanna killed by hiring someone else to carry it out. Elsa not only approved of the plan but also provided financial support, sending her son a large sum of money to carry out the crime. It took Jose nearly 2 months to find a hitman and finalize a detailed plan. On January 16, 2008, Rosanna, her sons, and her sister Monica went to the country house for another scheduled visit with Jose. Jose took the boys out for a walk, leaving the women in the house to wait for their return. Around 9 p.m., he sent a message saying that Geronimo, one of the boys, was feeling unwell with a fever and that he was taking him to the hospital. Rosanna grew concerned and sent multiple text messages to Jose, trying to understand what was happening, but he did not answer his phone. Around 10 p.m., Jose called Rosanna, but the call was a deadly trap. He knew the house had poor cell reception and anticipated that Rosanna would step outside to get a signal. As soon as she did, Monica heard 6 gunshots and rushed to see what had happened. She saw a dark figure slipping behind a fence into a vacant lot next door. Moments later, she found Rosanna lying on the ground, bleeding profusely. Monica ran back into the house to grab her phone but was initially unable to reach emergency services. In a panic, she called her brother, explained the situation, and asked him to immediately contact the police and medical assistance. Of the 6 shots fired, 4 struck Rosanna in the chest and neck, leaving her no chance of survival. By the time emergency services arrived, Rosanna had already stopped showing signs of life. She bled out within minutes, and doctors could only confirm her death. Her close family had no doubt about who was responsible for this tragedy. Jose was interrogated that same evening, but he feigned shock and insisted he had no part in his wife's death. Because he had an alibi, he was released pending further investigation. Fearing that Jose might bribe his way out of justice, Rosanna's relatives took the case to the media. However, the media attention may have backfired. Jose hired top-tier lawyers and gave interviews, tarnishing the reputations of Rosanna, her family, and her name. He claimed that Rosanna had been unfaithful, suggesting that any of her alleged lovers might have wanted her dead. He even accused Monica of involvement in the murder, arguing that she hadn't helped her dying sister but had instead called their brother. Monica, however, was thoroughly investigated, and no gunpowder residue was found on her clothes or hands. Ballistic tests confirmed that the shots had been fired from a .45 caliber pistol, a weapon too difficult for a slender woman like Monica to handle. Meanwhile, Jose continued to allege that Rosanna had numerous lovers, including the gardener and several other men from their household staff. The investigation initially moved slowly, but thanks to witness testimonies, Monica's detailed diary, and the photos on Oscar's phone, authorities were able to establish that Jose had been abusing Rosanna for years and had repeatedly threatened her with physical harm. Further investigations uncovered multiple instances in which Rosanna had called the police to report domestic abuse, with medical records corroborating her claims. Despite Jose being the prime suspect in his wife's death, the couple's sons remained in his custody, cared for by his mother, Elsa, for nearly 6 months. The Galliano family was initially barred from seeing the boys. It wasn't until the fall of 2008 that Graciela and Monica were granted visitation rights, though custody was denied. Oscar, who had photos on his phone showing Jose aiming a gun at his sister, began receiving anonymous threats and was placed under a witness protection program. Authorities attached a tracking device to monitor his movements. A few months later, the device likely saved his life when he was kidnapped by 2 unknown assailants, brutally beaten, and left for dead in a remote area outside the city. Thanks to the tracking signal, Oscar was found just in time and rushed to the hospital. Jose was arrested a year after Rosanna's death and charged with abuse, assault, and orchestrating a planned crime. Despite extensive investigation, the identity of the hired perpetrator was never determined. Jose's cousins, Paulo and Gabriel, were arrested as potential accomplices, but in April 2009, due to insufficient evidence, the charges against them were dropped and they were released. The trial of the main suspect faced repeated delays, fueling suspicions that the case was being intentionally stalled. During this period, it was revealed that Elsa, Jose's mother, had transferred a significant sum of money to her son shortly before the tragedy. The funds were allegedly intended to purchase a home for Rosanna and her sons. After the divorce, the property was never purchased, and the money disappeared from the account just weeks before the crime. Elsa was also arrested as an accomplice, but both she and Jose were released on bail shortly afterward. The trial finally began in the spring of 2013, more than 5 years after Rosanna's death, with Jose and Elsa as the only defendants. Since the identity of the hired perpetrator remained unknown, just a week into the trial, Jose suffered a stroke and was hospitalized, while Elsa was placed under house arrest. During this time, Geronimo and Nino continued living with the Galliano family. 6 months later, the trial resumed, and despite the defense team's efforts, both Jose and Elsa were found guilty. The primary motive was identified as Jose's refusal to divide property and custody of his sons during the divorce. Elsa was at least aware of her son's plans and actively supported him throughout the trial. The defendants tried to damage Rosanna's reputation, accusing her of multiple affairs, claims that were ultimately proven false. In November 2013, Jose and Elsa were convicted on all charges and sentenced to life imprisonment. However, by 2015, both had their sentences reduced to house arrest. Elsa's reduction was due to her advanced age, and Jose's followed another severe stroke. During this time, Geronimo and Nino were placed in the care of Elsa's younger sister. It wasn't until early 2017 that Rosanna's family, the Galianos, secured legal visitation rights with the boys. By then, however, both sons were teenagers who had been estranged from their maternal relatives for years. Their reunions with Rosanna's parents, siblings, and extended family were cold and distant, as the boys no longer felt a connection to them. On October 24, 2018, Jose passed away following another stroke, just 1 month shy of his 70th birthday. The following year, Elsa died at the age of 91, reopening questions of custody. With Geronimo only months away from turning 18, he chose to stay with Elsa's sister to avoid changing schools or moving, but was ultimately placed under the care of his Aunt Monica by court order. Both Geronimo and Nino, having endured years of trauma and loss, struggled with chronic depression, anxiety, and other psychological challenges. As Geronimo grew older, he moved to another city, severing ties with his maternal relatives, whom he viewed as strangers. Nino lived with his Aunt Monica until adulthood, but their relationship remained formal and distant. After finishing high school, he moved into a college dormitory and further distanced himself from Monica and other relatives on his mother's side. If you found this case fascinating, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. We post crime case videos every night. Until next time, stay sharp, stay vigilant.